folks, so in this video Robin's going to talk us through carving the seat. So earlier you were saying it's sensible to do this before you've sawn the seat out, so you've got good ways of clamping it.
Yep.
We've got our template here. So this line around the outside is basically protecting the arm post and the spindle deck, keeping it nice and flat.
Yep.
And I suppose that's where the joints are going in. You don't want a carved surface because it'll look a bit weird, so you want a nice flat surface for those to go into.
I mean, there's nothing saying you can't, but like you say, it'll just look a bit strange.
So first step, tracing that on. How do you do that?
So, classic back to school, you want to put...
Scribble on the back.
Scribble on the back, turn it over, line it up on your inside the marks you've got that you put on before, and you just transfer that dirty mark through the paper and onto the wood. You might want to go over it again so you can see it properly.
And it's probably not one that you'd want to pin prick through, right, with the pointy thing, because you're going to leave little marks in your... Exactly. But you could just draw, you could prick stick that onto cardboard, cut it out, and have something really nice and easy to draw around. Obvious different ways of doing it.
Yeah, some of mine, I cut that out and then I stick them back together.
Right.
And just take that bit off when I want to draw around it.
Nice.
Cool. And then I've measured...
Can we take that away?
Yeah, thank you.
There we go.
So the deepest part of our seat is between the two back leg holes, which is right here.
Is that just to give space for your bum, basically?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is just drill a hole to stop me drilling too deep. Sorry, to stop me shaving too deep. That's 3/4 of an inch, and there's a piece of tape. I'm just going to drill until the tape reaches the wood.
So you're going in like 19 mil.
Yep.
And how have you come up with the idea of 19 millimeters?
Good question.
How much depth is that leaving? So our plank's like nearly 60 mil, so you're still leaving 35 mil
our
thickness.
plank's 2 inch, we're leaving 1 1/4 inch on the bottom. I drill deeper with my American seats. It's a big ask to ask a beginner to remove much more than that from the seat. You're in control of this. You can go a bit deeper if you want. I wouldn't go much past halfway. I'd certainly leave 1/3 of the thickness of the plank at the bottom.
Yeah, 1/3 of the thickness of the plank.
Yeah.
And we're talking really on this one that we're leaving 1 1/4 inch, which is like 35 mil.
Plenty, yeah.
And then, so where the tenons come through from the legs, obviously the thicker the bit of wood, the stronger that is. Is there a kind of minimum? Is that what you're saying about 1/3?
Well, because these are up near the high point anyway, and we're going to sweep in, they're only going to lose a little bit. I wouldn't go straight down and across. You want some contact between your mortise and your tenon.
Yes. So you're not losing 3/4 of an inch here because that curves down and in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, so we're going to show you a few different tools to do it with. Us chair makers would jump in with an adze, but that's a very expensive tool. It's perfectly doable with a gouge.
So any old gouge, but I suppose one that's got a bit of a curve on the back is ideal.
Yeah, and this is hardwood. It'd be handy if it's one you can hit. So a ferrule on the end's not the end of the world either. Yeah.
It's surprising often you see people with in-canal gouges trying to do like hollow out a bowl or make a hollow in something. An in-canal gouge is basically when it's got the bevel on the inside, and they're designed for doing straight cuts and would be awful for this kind of thing. So you want the bevel on the outside, and otherwise it's going to be fine. Yeah.
Like with spoon carving, a lot of what we're going to be doing here is going into a cut and making sure we go back out of it.
Yes.
Or we're just going to create a really difficult surface to finish. So, I think we'll start showing the adze, shall we?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Yeah, let's crack on with the adze.
Yeah.
Shall I get rid of that pencil and ruler and then we'll get clamped up?
Thank you. Okay, so we've got a board nice and firmly held in a vise here. Our grain is running from left to right. I'm going to be cutting cross grain. If you'd set your board up with your grain this way, you would have it that way around in your vise. Going to draw a line, just give me about 1 inch clearance away from that spindle deck there so I don't go hitting it with my adze. And I'm just going to scoop out that part there with an adze. Okay, so with an adze, not too much body movement with your adze. You want to make a pivot and just peck away with it. Okay, so we just want to take this a little bit further, and then we'll flip the board around and come back from the other direction. One thing I didn't mention to you at the start, we aren't going all the way down to the bottom of the depth hole with the adze. That's our final depth, so we'll get near to this depth, and then we'll get a smoother tool to get the last piece out. Okay, so I've flipped the board over. I need to point out that this line here, I am going to go a bit more symmetrical. I just put it on in bright pink there so you guys could see it on camera. Okay, so just to show you, you don't have to use the adze, you can also use a gouge. One thing to watch for when you're doing this is this little line down the middle. The first couple of inches of this central line here is something we call the pommel, and we want to keep that nice and high. We'll carve that piece last, so keep your tool away from there for now. Now if you see, I'm going into my cut, and I'm coming back out of it. I'm not just digging a hole into the seat. As you can see, the workbench is just trying to get away from me a little bit. I would normally have that pushed up against the wall or be using a heavier one, but because we're filming and we need to stay in shot, I'm just holding it back with my foot a little bit. So this channel, if you like, that I'm cutting here right now is to sit on the back of your thigh, and I'm just blending that down into the bit where your buttock goes, which creates a nice downhill cut. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other side now and create this area for the thigh, which you guys don't need to see me do, and then we'll swap onto another tool. Okay, that's enough of the gouge for now. We're going to move on to a tool called a scorp next.
Nice.
So we're nearly down to our depth with the adze or the gouge. As you get more experience, you'll be able to get further and further to where you need to be with those heavier tools, but I'm going to show you a way, the next tool we use. You could take away all these high points with a gouge. You can do the whole seat with a gouge if you like, but the traditional tool to turn to next is this. We call it a scorp. A lot of people would also call it an in-shave. And again, the key to this is to get into a cut and get right back out of it again. Elbows nice and tight into your body. The strength of this cut is not you pulling like this. It's going to hurt you. It's you doing this with your whole body weight.
And so it's giving you a lot of control, but I suppose you're also getting a smoother finish because it's a shallower curve.
Yes.
So the gouge that we were using to rough it out, or the adze, has a tighter radius, so you're going to get these deeper, rougher furrows.
Yeah.
And a shallower one makes it smoother. So if you only had gouges, then you could use a shallower gouge to tidy it up.
Definitely, yes.
And is it, so the grain direction, mostly here, on everything that we've been doing, we've been cutting across the grain.
Yes.
Which is quite nice with a curved tool.
Yeah.
How would it be different if it was the other way? Would you still try and come across the grain, or would you just...
I would have started across the grain, yeah, just because if you make any mistakes with grain direction and you're hitting with a hammer, you can lift a big piece of wood out, particularly if you have gone with elm and maybe you've got something a bit softer. You could, you know, seasoned boards are a lot more expensive than green wood.
Yeah.
A lot of this is just being very careful as we go.
So definitely think about grain direction, and just bear in mind that when you're going across the grain, you're less likely for it to dig in.
Yes.
So we've got the grain running along this way, so the trunk of the tree was growing up this way, the fiber's going that way, and most of our cuts has been coming across it, and that's nice. If you had the seat orientated the other way around, then you'd maybe want to be doing most of your carving in the other direction so that you're still cutting across those fibres.
Yes, and another thing to look for some clues, where I've been hitting that gouge there, that is very smooth there, so, and I've hit that way. That's the tip I need to know that I need to cut that way most of the time. Obviously, when I've got this little curve here, I'm going to have to come this way a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
But as you make more seats, you'll know. I did one recently where it was down there and all the way and off the end was a straight cut, just because of a wave in the tree.
And also, in our book, there's a project, Carving and Bowl.
Yes.
And that way you can learn quite a lot about the grain when you're doing a kind of three-dimensional hollow. So it might be good to try carving and bowl before you do the share.
Yes.
Cool.
I'm going to flip this round because most of our downhill is that way, isn't it?
Yeah. So for the camera's sake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can just spin the workbench.
Oh yeah, if you're at home, you just whip round.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
stand
so you would just turn round. Cool.
Okay. Still avoiding this middle section for now.
So that's going to be the pommel, right?
Yeah.
So you're trying to take quite fine cuts, trying really hard not to dig in.
Yeah.
You're getting there pretty quick. Scorp is a nice tool.
The scorp is a fantastic tool, yeah.
And you should see how easy the American chair makers make this look. But that's because they tend to be using really soft wood.
Yeah, they cheat. Just a little bit rough there, which is a little clue that maybe I need to just check which direction I'm going in. Okay, so we've just changed the lighting a little bit there so we can pick up the shadows that rough surface is finishing. Now I've got that by coming slightly this way. I'm just going to change the direction of my cut a bit and you should see it start to come shiny. You see why we're getting much better surface here? So basically, if you're not getting a clean surface, have a little fish around at your grain direction. And one place you're going to have to be careful is when you get to these little knots, because the grain direction will swirl around those a little bit. So you will get a much smoother surface if you're carving with the grain, i.e. from the top of the tree to the bottom, but there's more chance of your tool digging in. So remember to keep pulling it out of your cuts. So as you can see now, I'm carving along the grain, which is along the direction the tree has grown. And it gives me a lovely finish, but I'll show you as I get to this higher point here, look, it's starting to want to dig in again. So I've just got to be careful to come right out of my cut. Also, if it may just be that you need to come from the other direction eventually. Okay, so we've excavated with the scorp all nearly down to our depth mark now. We need to remove a little bit more material here to get our thighs in, but for me to do that we just need to cut this front edge off the board first. So we'll do that next with our jigsaw.
Great. Great, so Roman's going to saw out the seat with a jigsaw. It's a really good option, and it's a saw that most people will have. Needless to say, you could just use a bandsaw. In the book, we've actually got instructions how to make a little frame saw like this. For cutting curves and things, you tend to want to have a turning saw. So that's when you can actually rotate the blade around. And that enables you to come around and cut a curve. These are just bandsaw blades that we've fitted. So you'd want to get the appropriate blade for cutting a curve. But probably the best option for a lot of people is just going to be a jigsaw.
Yeah, or your axe.
That'd be a lot of work with an axe.
Yeah.
But, if you've got time to kill, if it's,
You're not tied to a jigsaw. Remove the wood. Okay, so it's good to have good PPE equipment. I'm not here to teach you how to use a jigsaw. If you follow the manufacturer's guidelines, you should be okay. Great, so we've sawn that out and we're just going to put a little line on to cut to now with our draw knife. There's no set rules here. Look for a line you like the shape of and use that.
I suppose it depends how thick your thighs are.
Yep.
We put a little chamfer on the bottom, didn't we?
We will do eventually, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't go right the way down to the bottom.
No.
To be honest, you don't need as much as you might think.
No.
And a shallow is definitely looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Don't make it too much hard work.
So, if you're used to using a draw knife on a shave horse, you just need to be a little bit careful of it here because I'm not sitting on a shave horse. I'm going to use my body to move the tool, so I'm not actually pulling the tool into my body. You'll see what I mean in a second. And we'll cut from the right direction, I think.
Good idea. Well, I suppose that is worth pointing out that if the grain is coming out in this direction, then doing these scallops will be cutting across the fibres, which is really easy. Mm-hmm. And coming this way, you're more kind of in line with it, so there's more risk of it digging in, I suppose.
So, skewed blade. One arm slightly longer than the other. I'm going to use as much of the blade as I can as I go.
So you're basically doing quite a steep cut to get down to that line.
Yeah. The handle of the draw knife will get in the way.
Right, okay.
If you try to do it too shallow. So you can get this bit out first and then start to go a little shallower now.
And I suppose it's a concave cut because it's going down and up.
Yeah.
But in terms of kind of in this direction coming out, you're actually creating a convex, aren't you? That's what you want in the long run because that's kind of comfy for your thigh.
Yep.
Just not as steep as that.
Mm-hmm.
Start steep and then extend it shallow backwards. Nice.
Right, we're just going to go over onto the other side now and continue. Now, if you see, I've just got a slightly tricky little bit of a knot there. I'm just going to come at that from both directions to make sure we don't tear any of the wood away. Actually, that's quite nice. It's letting me cut downhill from there. Right, the chair, the wood is speaking to me there. Listen to it, saying come from the other side.
I think I nearly heard it.
Yeah.
Come from the other side.
It came out as... Okay, that's about as much as we can get out with it to the draw knife. A quick come from the other side.
Oh. Beautiful. So that's as far as you go with the draw knife, down to the line.
Yep.
And what's next?
Next we go to a tool called a travisher. Again, still be using your gouge here. You don't need to suddenly write a big shopping list of several £100 worth of tools.
Yeah. That's is that one of the Windsor Workshop ones?
This is a Windsor Workshop.
Ben Orford blade in a James Marcel
Yep.
body.
Yep. Great little tool.
So just talk us through that then. How does that actually work? 'Cause
So it isn't unlike a spoke shave, except you've got a curved sole. The knack to using these is you're concentrating on this front edge of the tool, and just rub that backwards and forwards, and to come out of the cut you lean forwards with this tool. So I'm in the cut now and I lean out.
So you're basically just working back from these front scallops, the steep bit, to even it out back into the kind of bum print at the back.
Yeah. This bit of wood here is basically would dig right into the back of your fly if it's left behind.
So doesn't the front part of the travisher just wear away?
Yep.
Right.
It does eventually, but if you can make one of these, you can make one of these.
Right, okay.
Have another piece of wood.
So does it matter that it wears away?
No, because, you know, it's the shape of the blade that gives you the finish.
Right, okay.
James has actually redone these recently out of, I'm not sure what the material is. I think it's a very hard plastic, and he's put a brass sole on here.
Yeah, because you see old wooden spoke shaves and stuff with little brass soles.
Yeah, and it does look a really good tool.
Okay.
I mean, I've used that a lot. And
so how do you set this up then? What? You're just trying to have the blade poking out a little bit like you do with a plane, basically?
Yeah, I haven't found it, actually. Your control of what you dip in is the most important part.
Can I have a little go?
Yeah, of course you can.
Shall I do it? I'll try to go on the bit that you've done.
Yep.
That should be easier, in theory. So, we're... Woohoo!
So you start on the toe.
Yeah, it's not as easy as you make it look. So the speed is kind of... Oh, there we go.
Yeah, and at the end of your cut, just tilt it forwards. You want to come that way.
Yeah, I get the theory.
It's doing
it. But that kind of rubbing it first on the front and then... Yeah, because you want to, it's the opposite to the draw knife, isn't it?
Yes.
Or the gouge or anything else. You'd be trying to scoop up and out. This one you're scooping and then back onto it like that. So you'd be kind of going along like that, and then when you want to stop the cut, you're lifting out.
Yes.
But yeah, that technique of rubbing, that's the bit, isn't it? Yeah, that's a really lovely tool.
It is.
That's a great little tool, actually. So I know for the book, we're trying to keep it simple. We're just using the scorp. Yeah. But it is a traditional chairmaker's tool, and it's the perfect thing for kind of smoothing out any of those gouge marks or scorp marks.
Yes.
Okay, so there was one more thing that you wanted to show us with the travisher. What was that?
The coming down either side of the pommel.
Great, okay.
We'll just remove...
So the pommel's just that raised bit in the middle?
Yeah. We'll just remove a little bit more wood from these leg scallops, and then we'll show them that.
Perfect.
Okay, so after I've smoothed lots of this chair out now, I just want to go back to my scorp and talk to you a little bit about this pommel here. The pommel being this slightly raised area at the front of the seat. So I'm actually going to rub away my line and just tilt it back a little bit, and then I'm going to draw the line back in it and then carve a slope to either side.
So that's a really nice detail. It's going to make it look a lot nicer than just leaving it flat as it was.
Oh yeah.
It's a really good little tip, that, because I think intuitively you might think, right, okay, I've just got my ridge here and come down either side, but by tilting it back in, it's going to make a lot more elegant and more comfortable shape.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're going to draw that line back on. So as you can see, I've just left a tiny bit of my line there. So I can put my ruler on that line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball down here and just put a dot. Because as soon as you bend a ruler and try and draw a straight line with it, you don't get a straight line.
That's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
People don't believe me when I say that.
Oh no, I do. Absolutely.
I used to use bendy rulers on spoons.
Yeah, I don't anymore.
No.
So now I'm just going to be careful to remove the wood either side of that line. Be careful to leave the line behind for now.
And when you're trying to be very controlled, you seem to go to that skewed cut.
Oh yeah, you've got more contact with your piece of wood. If you imagine you're cutting straight on and then you turn it, you've just got a longer piece of steel inside the same shaving.
Guiding it down.
And again, a lot of it as well, I'm not pulling now, I'm leaning backwards with my body weight. A nice controlled cut. And I'll also, while we're here, I will blend away this little bit we've cut so we can check the pommel's coming down at a nice slope. I think something worth mentioning when you're using a sawn board, if you've been using cleft billets a lot, you'll get more surprises from the grain because you haven't split down the grain. So any undulation in the grain is just going to be in the board waiting for you. So just take your time.
Totally. And trees flare. The trunk of a tree flares.
Yeah.
So unless you've been very lucky or had a very pernickety skilled sawyer, then it's really frequent for the grain to be running out of the boards. Even if it's only out slightly, it can really significantly affect how you expect to be able to carve the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really the beauty of cleft wood, right?
Absolutely.
But you're not going to cleave out a seat.
No. And you'll be waiting an awful long time for it to dry.
Would you ever, if you're really struggling with the grain, just come back in with a chisel or something like that, where you can just have very fine control over millimetre cuts?
Half round file or rasp
is
definitely the tool to do something like that. I'm ever so fussy. I don't use rasps.
No.
I can see they do a very good job.
A good rasp goes a long way.
A good rasp.
But you want a fancy one.
You will be paying. We're just going to go across to the other side of the pommel now. Okay, so the pommel is now very nearly blended in, and these last couple of cuts I'm going to take away that pencil line. And there we have our pommel. When we come at the very end and tidy the chair up, we'll probably just tidy that up a little bit more. But, we'll carry on with shaping for now. We've got this last piece to blend in, and then we will move on to the next stage. Okay, so we're now at the stage where you're left with a few options. At home at this point, I would go with a card scraper and then a rub with sandpaper. If you have an orbital sander, that would do you a load of good here. You can leave it with the carving marks on it if you like. There's no set rules there, but you are at the point now where you're not really any quicker using an edge tool. You may as well go to an abrasive or walk away.
Totally, and I think that's the one that we did in the book. I think we just said, let's just leave a carved finish.
Yep.
I know on the back of the Crest,
you can still see the pencil line.
Yeah, and there's axe marks and everything. Yeah. But that's all good, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll at some point do a video on using a scraper and sharpening it. But that's a lovely finish. There's not anything that you wouldn't want. There's no roughness there.
Well, it's not going to fur up or anything, is it?
No.
So the next job is we need to cut off the rest of the board so that we can put a bevel on the inside, a little bevel around the outside here. And while we're doing that, because we're going to have the saw out, we will also cut out our crest and our arm posts from our board.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so we've got the other templates. We've got the arm, which we'll need 2 of, and then the crest. Obviously, we just have one crest, but there's 2 templates for that. So one of them is the curve, and that matches the curve of where the spindles come up. Now, so a lot of Windsor chairs would have splay on the spindles and posts, just like we have on these front arm posts. Yeah. And certainly the chairs you're used to doing, the American ones, are very fancy, complicated. So we're trying to keep it simple. These ones just go straight up. Which means that essentially the Crest template wants to match these holes on the bottom in the spindle deck. So we can take our plank of wood and just transfer these measurements onto it and use that as our template. Now, we've actually designed this chair around a 2-inch board. So with about, well, pretty much precisely 8 millimeters leeway. So where I'm just showing you here. So with 8 millimeters leeway at the front and with 8 millimeters leeway at the back. So this is the spindle that's the furthest back in the center and 8 millimeters back there. We basically perfectly fit a 2-inch plank in between that. So it's quite tight. And really that's because we want to have some curve on the back here. It's an aesthetic thing, it's a comfort thing. And possibly slightly more curve would be better.
Yes, yeah, but you're getting into the realms of quite a big piece of wood, aren't you?
Either a massive bit of wood or steam bending. Yeah. That was not what we wanted to do for this chair. We'd love you guys to go out and try other styles too. But our idea was to use a 2-inch plank, get as much curve out of it as we can. So we'll show you how to do that. It's probably simpler to cut this one out after you've actually shaped the curve. So we'll show you how to do that in a bit, but essentially we're going to start off with just a rectangle that this fits into. So if you imagine that just being a flat rectangle without these scallop cuts in them. We'll shape the curve, so that profile into it, mark out the holes. It's actually easier to drill the holes whilst it's all square anyway.
Oh yeah.
And then we can shape that up. So that's the next step, is just to cut out a rectangle of our 2-inch elm for the crest. And then what's our plan for the arms?
Well, this is the thinner end of the board that we've taken the seat wood from. And if we get our 2 templates and just have a little jiggle around, we'll see if we can't get all 3 from this one piece. No. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, and don't forget, so the arm template has got some grain direction on it, on the other side. So this is a recommendation where it's thinnest and where the hole is at the back is is good, quite a weak point. So you want the strength of the grain running through there.
Yeah.
If you had it like that in the plank, the grain would be running along that way and it would be very weak here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get your straight grain into your thinnest part for sure. So I think we'll get all 3 out of there, won't we?
Yeah,
1,
perfect.
2.
Okay, so we've finally got our heads around how to draw it onto the board, and now we're just going to saw them out. Obviously, bear in mind that in the book, we've suggested that you can make it from green wood. You're obviously cleaving out thick bits of green wood, shaping them, letting them dry for quite a long time. We're using our seasoned wood, so it means that we don't have to dry it, which is really helpful. And now we just need to saw these out. This wouldn't be a fun thing to do with an axe. You could use your frame saw, jigsaw, or bandsaw, get it sawn, and we'll see you in a bit.
Okay, so we're back from the saw. We realised as we were going that this is a 2-inch thick board, so we sawed out one arm and ripped it up the middle to give us 2 arms.
That was partly laziness, wasn't it?
No, that's because elm's expensive.
It's good, it's frugal,
Yes.
and it's plenty thick enough, right? We'll have to wait and see, but I think
Yes.
it's going to look just as good.
Absolutely.
We used thicker, so this is now 1 inch thick, each one, and the ones from green we thought were maybe more like 1.5 inches, no, 1.25
There's
35 mil.
Not a lot in it.
No, and what's nice is then they'll be perfectly symmetrical,
Yes.
even if you've cut them out wonky. Do they look pretty, the grain as well?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that, it's lovely.
Lovely elm.
So we've sawn that out, did the profile, and then ripped it down the centre, 2 arms done.
Yes.
Not really, are they? They need to be carved and drilled, but we'll come back to those.
Yes.
Right, crest. We've got a chunk of wood. 2 inches should be just about enough to have the same pattern of holes as we've got on the spindle deck. So we talked about that already. So these are all going up straight instead of being splayed. Makes it easier to come in here. We just need to mark these out on the top here. And you're reckoning at least 6 mil or 1/4 inch leeway either side.
Certainly no less.
And that's from the outside of the holes. So what we're thinking is if this was translucent, so this one's actually been made for the green plank, which you can make a little bit thicker, but the crosses will still fit on, and it'd be quite easy if this was see-through. I suppose you can still line it up and poke it through. But another way is to just measure it. So let's do that. So we want a centre point. Is that? Oh.
That's marked.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well done, you. So obviously, I do trust you.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So how long is it?
37, so we went for 18.5.
Great. Yeah, pretty good. Well done, you. And then these ones in the middle are 75, and then these outer ones are just ever so slightly shorter gap, which is 65. So we can mark that on to our crest.
So I put that centre line on.
Yeah, great. Good thinking.
And then you want 75 either side of that.
Oh, it's really nice just having someone to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Okay, 75, 75. Should I draw those square?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done those 75 and I've squared those off. So now these want to be 65.
They do.
What's 65 plus 75?
140.
Yeah. So more accurate to measure 140 from the centre, right? Than to double up errors. Okay, 140. Oh, it's difficult. Great. So that's one line of our centre marks for our drill holes. And now we need to look at the depth. So we're trying to fit them in so that we've got our 1/4 inch either side. So shall I measure in 1/4 inch from the back?
Yeah, because if you see we've just got that slight curve in the grain there, so we might. Have that
yeah,
with
good
us, haven't we?
thinking. So if I flip it that way round
Yeah.
and have that as the back.
Yeah. So we've turned it round because the grain here, it just starts to run out that way, and we've got to cut that shape in anyway, so that will just make it for a stronger piece because we'll have complete grain from one end to the other.
Right, so we're drilling these holes at 12 mil. So I'm going to come in 12.5 mil, which is about ½ an inch, and that means that's the centre of my hole, and that will give us about 6 mil clearance on the side.
Yep.
And then on the next one, I'm going to come in 1 inch, which is the centre.
Yep.
Okay, and it's about 25 mil, and then we want the same from the other side. So do that, and that, and that. Okay, so we've got those marked now. So we've got our ½ inch, 12.5 there. We've got our inch, which is right in the middle, which is 25 mil there. And then we've got our 1¼ inch, which is our 35 mil there. And that's just mirrored on this side. So that is essentially going to set the curve. And we may as well drill these whilst we've got it nice and square. Oh, yeah. Easier to drill straight down, easier to clamp, and then we can start looking at shaping it.
Okay, so we are set up to drill into the crest. We've got 90 degrees here, and Barn is gonna...
So I'm using a straight edge against the side, and I suppose this is the important bit. We don't want to drill through the side. It's only a very slender bit of wood that we've got to play with here. Mm-hmm. We've got to be very careful.
I've got a depth stop on my drill, which is 35 millimeters up from the start of the cutting edge, not from the lead screw.
And I suppose actually if you wanted to be, I think doing it 10 mil spindles, it makes it slightly harder to turn, but more likely to fit into the crest.
Yeah. These measurements are not set in stone by any means.
It's 6 of one, ½ dozen of the other. We're making the turning easier and the drilling harder.
Yeah.
And probably the most easy option would be to have a thicker bit of wood.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so you're looking pretty dead on here.
Okay, we're going to go for it.
Yeah, why not? To you a bit. Just a touch. Away a bit. Yeah. Nicely done.
Make sure you don't get any chips underneath your bevel gauge, your square.
Sliding bevel.
Thank you.
We've got to find out what a bevel gauge is at some point.
It's just another name for one of them, I'm sure it is.
Is it American?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To you a touch.
How's that?
Not that much. Oh dear. Yeah. Away a bit. Great. Ooh.
How does that look?
Yeah, go away quite a lot. To you. Yeah. Away a touch. Just a touch. Not that much. Way off. Back. Yeah. Away a touch. Just a touch. That's it. To you a bit. Away. To you a bit. Sorry, away I mean. Yeah. Not that much.
It's not going to change now, is it?
To you a bit.
Way down.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's okay, yeah.
And that's the crest drilled. Okay, so you can use your vernier gauge just to check the depths of your holes. Just make sure you've got all the wood chips out of them first. And we want it to be on around 35, didn't we?
Yeah, and the reason we need that depth is because we've gone for that pretty detail with these pegs. So these contrasting pegs, and because we're using elm for the new one, then we'll probably use ash pegs to go in the top. But it's this centre one that needs that depth. So yeah, 30, 35, something like that.
Yep.
For 25 mil, an inch is pretty good for a tenon on something like that, but if you're going to peg it, then you want it a little bit above, right? So
the standard rule for a tenon is never make a tenon less than twice the depth of its width.
Twice the depth of its width.
Half-inch wide tenon needs to be at least an inch deep.
There we go. Great. I like that. Top tip. So let's now have a look at how far these holes come in, because in shaping this crest, if you imagine on the top, have we got a pencil somewhere? Here's the pencil. If we want to make it feel like it's got more shape, on the top here, we can remove a lot more material to give us our shape, thinning it down, because we don't need to worry about coming into where the holes are. At the bottom, we can't shape it as much. So let's mark on the depth, and I suppose we want to maybe think about the lead screw as well.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Particularly for these bits, we want to make sure that the lead screw's not coming through it.
So there's our depth mark.
And you can see we've given ourselves plenty of leeway there.
But do check it, just in case.
So let's just mark on a line then. So what did we say it was? 35?
35 plus, just measure it at that.
Yeah, should we just do it at 40, just to be...
Bit higher. We've got a bit of lead screw over there. Go 45 just to make sure.
Fussy.
I am fussy. And now I'm going to double check it.
That was a way off.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's that. I'm going to draw around this, and then we can start thinking a little bit about shaping. There we go.
Now we go to the saw.
Okay, so obviously we've sawn these scalloped cuts in, and now really we just want to add a bit of shape. So if you imagine off the back here, remember we want to have a bit of bulk, and it's just about evening out some kind of curve. So we really don't want to take virtually anything off there. And off this bottom, we can be coming in something along the lines of that. But then we can take this curve much tighter at the top. So we've kind of lost that line now. But remember I was saying, it's actually nice to give, for lumbar support, you know that we're having our spindles coming straight up from our spindle deck. Really, I think something like 10 degrees is about right. So having that bit of lean back on our crest will make it much more comfortable for your back. So there's a lot of bulk here. And I think just like in the book with the green bit of wood, I would actually just crack on with an axe now. So get your axe out and start shaping away. Probably taking off a lot of this bulk down to this line before the awkward bit in the middle, kind of coming back in both directions. And then just using draw knife, shave horse, adze, whatever you fancy to get that kind of three-dimensional shape out.
One last thing we need to do to the seat is just put a little bevel around this edge here to knock that sharp edge off. I'm just going to hold my pencil an even distance away from the chair edge and just draw around it. And then do the same thing on the edge as well. I'm just going to clamp this straight down onto the bench. I'm just going to use my spoke shave. You could use a draw knife, you could push a chisel around here, whichever tool you're most comfortable with. Just going to be very careful on this bit here. Okay, so I've cut my bevel on the bottom, I've cut a bevel on the top as well, and then the last job to do is just to get rid of the saw marks, tidy up the sides.